She was humiliated for falling for a simple cowboy asterisk. She was humiliated for getting involved with a simple cowboy, treated as a disgrace by her own family asterisk. But what nobody knew was that he was the true heir to those lands. Their discredited love became leadership, and the couple silenced the elite with work, justice, and courage asterisk. Little did they know that behind that passion was the greatest twist that farm had ever witnessed asterisk. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. Emily took a deep breath as the sun rose behind the Virginia mountains. Her eyes, accustomed to early mornings, gazed at the property that stretched as far as she could see. Her calloused hands gripped the hoe handle tightly. 23 years of life, all marked by hard work on her father's farm, Anthony Miller, a man both respected and feared in the region asterisk. That morning, like every other, Emily fulfilled her obligations before the first workers even arrived. The vegetable garden was her responsibility, as was milking the cows and organizing the house. Her brother, Richard, tended the cattle with their father, while she remained confined to tasks considered women's work. "Aren't you finished yet, girl?" Anthony's harsh voice cut through the morning air. "Breakfast should already be on the table." Emily hurried without responding. She had learned early that words of protest only brought more problems. Her pretty face, with delicate features, maintained a serene expression that hid years of imposed silence and daily humiliations asterisk. In the kitchen, she prepared the strong coffee her father demanded and set out the cornbread she had baked the night before. The table, impeccably set as always, received no praise, only critical looks searching for flaws. "There's a market in town today. I want you to come with me," announced Anthony between sips of coffee. "It's time to resolve your situation." Emily felt a tightness in her chest. She knew well the meaning of those words. At 23, she was considered an old maid by local standards, and her father had already tried on other occasions to arrange a marriage for her with much older men in the region. "Father, I could stay and finish cleaning the—" "That wasn't a request," he interrupted, slamming his cup on the table with enough force to splash coffee onto the white tablecloth. "Wear your best dress. We leave in an hour." Asterisk. The old pickup truck cut through the dirt road, kicking up dust. Emily, seated next to her father, kept her eyes fixed on the landscape. She wore a simple dress, light blue, the only one she considered presentable enough for going to town. Her brown hair, normally tied in a functional bun, fell loose around her shoulders asterisk. The St. John's Field Market was the weekly meeting point for the entire region. Rural producers, merchants, and residents of the small town gathered in the EU central square to negotiate, converse, and catch up on news. Emily always liked that colorful and noisy environment, so different from the oppressive silence of the farm. "Good morning, Anthony. Brought your daughter today," greeted Gerald, the local store owner, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I did. It's past time she settled down in life," her father responded, in a tone that made Emily's face burn with shame asterisk. In minutes, a small circle of men formed. Conversations about harvests and cattle prices soon gave way to comments and looks that evaluated Emily like merchandise. She kept her eyes lowered, feeling the weight of each word, each suppressed laugh. "My daughter is accomplished. She knows how to cook, keep house, has good health," declared Anthony, as if announcing the qualities of an animal for sale. "She just needs a man to keep her in line." Asterisk. That was when it happened. In the middle of the square, before all present, Anthony proceeded with his public humiliation. "I'm tired of feeding a mouth that only gives me work. Whoever wants an obedient wife, here she is. I'll even throw in a piece of land as dowry." Asterisk. The silence that followed was deafening. The looks varied between morbid curiosity and embarrassment. Emily felt her legs weaken, but she remained firm, swallowing the tears that threatened to fall. "That's no way to treat a woman." Asterisk. The deep and firm voice came from a man who was approaching. Emily raised her eyes to see who had spoken those words. It was Michael Oliver, a worker from the neighboring farm. Young, perhaps 28, athletic from hard work, face marked by the sun, and eyes of a deep brown that looked at her with a mixture of indignation and respect. "Don't meddle where you're not invited, boy," replied Anthony, visibly bothered by the interference. "I will meddle when I see injustice being done," replied Michael without averting his gaze. "Miss Emily deserves respect." Asterisk. The crowd that had formed around them watched attentively, waiting for the unexpected confrontation to unfold. Some whispered, others simply waited, tense. "And what do you intend to do about it?" challenged Anthony, approaching Michael threateningly. Asterisk. That quote S. When Michael did something no one expected. He turned to Emily, who was watching him in astonishment, and said in a loud voice for everyone to hear, "Emily Miller, I may not have much wealth, but I have an honest heart and hands willing to work. If you'll accept me, I ask for your hand in marriage right here before everyone." Asterisk. A murmur ran through the crowd. Emily felt the world spin around her. She barely knew this man, only by sight from the few times he had come to the farm to do business with her father. How could she accept such a proposal? However, looking at her father and seeing his face contorted with rage and even more embarrassment at having been publicly confronted, Emily realized that this might be her only chance for freedom. "I accept," she answered, with a voice that didn't seem like her own, such was its firmness. Asterisk. Anthony, pressured by the community's gazes, had no choice but to consent, although he imposed conditions. "I'll only allow it if everything is done properly, with the papers in order and the priest's blessing. I don't want my daughter living in sin." Asterisk. Michael agreed with a nod. The tension in the air began to dissipate, but Emily knew that this moment represented much more than a simple matrimonial agreement. It was the beginning of a new life, for better or worse. Asterisk. As they left the square, Emily noticed a man observing the scene from a distance. It was Edward Matthews, the largest landowner in the region, known for his wealth and power. There was something in his gaze that disturbed her, a mixture of interest and calculation that she couldn't decipher. Asterisk. That night, lying in her bed at the Miller farm, Emily couldn't sleep. In less than a month, she would be married to a man she barely knew, through a gesture she still didn't completely understand. Was it genuine concern, or did Michael have other intentions? Through the open window came the perfume of wildflowers. Emily breathed deeply, letting that familiar aroma calm her. Whatever future awaited her, it would be different from the present she knew, and that, in itself, was already a hope to which she could cling. Asterisk. On the other side of the region, Michael was also contemplating the stars, thinking about the impulsive decision he had made. There was much more at stake than anyone could imagine. A secret he had carried for years, and that now took an unexpected turn with that sudden marriage. Asterisk. The preparations for the wedding happened with surprising speed. 3 weeks after the episode in the square, Emily found herself in front of the mirror, adjusting a simple wedding dress inherited from a maternal aunt. The fabric, yellowed by time, had been carefully washed, and some hasty modifications had been made so it would fit her slim body. Asterisk. Her hands trembled slightly as she sewed a small red embroidery on the hem of the dress, her initials EM, discreetly, marked as a silent symbol that, from that day forward, her life would finally have its own authorship. "It's almost time," announced Mrs. Clara, a woman who was helping with the preparations. "The groom has already arrived with the best men." Asterisk. Emily took a deep breath. There had been no bachelorette party, no emotional tears from her mother, who had passed away years ago. Anthony remained distant and formal, fulfilling only what was necessary to not lose face before the community. Asterisk. The ceremony would be held in the yard of Michael's house, a modest space that neighbors had helped decorate with wildflowers and colorful ribbons. Upon arriving, Emily was surprised by the care everyone had dedicated to that moment. Paper lanterns illuminated the path to the improvised altar, where the local priest waited. Asterisk. Michael was waiting for her, wearing his best clothes, a simple but well-pressed suit. His eyes met hers, and for the first time since the incident in the square, Emily saw in him something beyond the determined man who had defended her. There was nervousness, expectation, and perhaps even a hint of uncertainty. Asterisk. The ceremony proceeded with the simplicity typical of rural celebrations. Traditional vows were exchanged. A silver ring with a small blue stone was placed on her finger, and thus, in less than an hour, Emily Miller became Emily Oliver. Asterisk. During the small party that followed, with food prepared by the women of the neighborhood and music played by local musicians, Emily noticed the presence of the same man she had observed in the square. Edward Matthews kept himself at a distance, talking with some farmers, but his gaze frequently turned to the newlywed couple. "Your boss came to honor our union," commented Emily to Michael when they had a moment alone. "He's not my boss," replied Michael with an enigmatic expression. "I work on the farm next to his." Asterisk. Before Emily could question further, Edward approached the couple. Tall, elegant, with his well-lived 50 years and a posture that denoted natural authority, the landowner greeted them with a calculated smile. "Congratulations to the newlyweds. An unexpected wedding, but one that brings hope to our community." Asterisk. His words sounded rehearsed, and his gaze lingered longer than necessary on Emily, who felt an inexplicable discomfort. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Matthews," replied Michael, in a respectful but firm tone. "Could I have a word in private with you, Michael?" asked Edward, indicating a place away from the crowd. Asterisk. Michael hesitated for an instant but agreed. Emily observed the two men walking away, talking in low voices. When Michael returned minutes later, his expression had changed. He was tense, worried. "Is everything all right?" she asked, apprehensive. "Yes, just work matters," he replied, forcing himself to smile. "Let's enjoy our party." Asterisk. The night advanced, and gradually the guests began to leave. Emily and Michael finally found themselves alone in the small two-room house that would be their home. He had prepared the space with care. Colorful curtains of cheap fabric adorned the windows. Wildflowers in repurposed jars brought life to the simple rooms, and a handmade rug covered part of the packed earth floor. "It's not much, but it's honest," said Michael, watching Emily explore the space. "With time we can improve." "It's more than I've had in my entire life," she replied with sincerity. Asterisk. Their first night together was marked not by intense passion, but by mutual respect that surprised Emily. Michael prepared an improvised bed for himself in the living room, leaving the only bedroom for her. "I know we don't really know each other," he explained. "I want you to know that I don't expect anything beyond what you're willing to offer. We have time." Asterisk. Those words, spoken with simplicity, planted in Emily the first seed of true trust. Asterisk. The days that followed established a peaceful routine. Michael left at dawn to work in the fields, while Emily took care of the house and a small garden she had begun to cultivate. At noon she would bring lunch to where he worked, and they would share that moment in contemplative silence, observing the landscape that stretched as far as the eye could see. Asterisk. It was during one of these lunches, almost a month after the wedding, that Emily finally gathered the courage to ask the question that had been bothering her. "Why did you do that? Why did you ask me to marry you in the square?" Asterisk. Michael stopped eating and looked at her seriously before answering, "I couldn't bear to see someone being treated that way, especially you. But you barely knew me." "I knew enough," he replied, turning his gaze to the horizon. "I saw how hard you worked, how well you treated everyone, even when your father humiliated you. I heard stories about your kindness. That was enough for..." Asterisk. There was something more in his words. Emily could feel it, but she didn't insist. Time would bring her the answers she sought. Asterisk. In the following weeks, Emily was surprised to notice small changes in herself. Away from her father's constant criticism, her posture became more confident. Her ideas began to flow more freely. Without fanfare, she started a small community garden with other women from the neighborhood. It was a modest action, but one that was already causing discomfort among those who preferred to keep things as they had always been. "They're saying that you're inciting women to abandon their duties," commented Michael one night when he returned from work. "We're just planting together, exchanging seeds and knowledge," Emily defended herself, fearing that he might also oppose it. Asterisk. To her surprise, Michael smiled. Continue. It's good to see life sprouting from your hands. Asterisk. That approval strengthened even more the bond that was beginning to form between them. It wasn't romantic love, not yet, but a partnership based on mutual respect and shared goals. Asterisk. It was on a Sunday afternoon, as they were returning from the local church, that Emily noticed unusual movement on the road leading to Edward Matthews' property. Elegant cars, very different from the simple vehicles of the region, were crossing the gates of the farm. "What's happening?" she asked Michael. "It seems Mr. Matthews is receiving important visitors," he replied, with a worried expression. "Lawyers, probably." "Is everything okay? You seem uneasy." Michael hesitated before answering. "Just worried about the harvests. They say winter will be harsh this year." Emily knew there was more to it than that, but she respected her husband's silence. Everyone had their secrets, and she, more than anyone, understood the need to keep them guarded until the right moment. In the days that followed, the movement at the Matthews farm intensified. Doctors, lawyers, and well-dressed people Emily had never seen before came and went constantly. Rumors were quick to spread. Edward Matthews was gravely ill. "Is it true what they're saying about Mr. Matthews?" Emily asked Michael when he returned particularly tense from work. "Yes," he answered after a long silence. "He doesn't have much time." The news, for some reason that Emily didn't completely understand, seemed to deeply affect her husband. That night she found him sitting on the porch, looking at the stars with an expression that mixed concern and a strange resolution. "There's something I need to tell you," said Michael when she sat beside him. "Something that will change everything between us." Emily felt her heart accelerate. Was he regretting the marriage? Was there another woman? The possibilities, all painful, passed through her mind in seconds. "Whatever it is, I'm ready to hear it," she replied. Preparing for the worst. Michael breathed deeply, like someone gathering courage to take a leap in the dark. "I'm not who you think I am, Emily. My real name is Michael Matthews Oliver." The silence that followed was filled only by the sound of crickets and the gentle swaying of leaves in the wind. Emily looked at him, trying to process the meaning of those words. "Matthews, like Edward Matthews?" "Yes," confirmed Michael, holding her hands in his. "Edward Matthews is my father." Emily felt the world spin around her as Michael's words echoed in her mind. The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. Edward Matthews's enigmatic look on their wedding day, the private conversation between the two men, the tension Michael always showed whenever the landowner's name was mentioned. "How is this possible?" she asked when she finally found her voice. "Why did you hide this from me?" Michael ran his hand through his hair in a nervous gesture that Emily already recognized. "My mother, Teresa, worked in the main house of the Matthews farm. She was young, beautiful, and Edward fell for her. When she became pregnant, she was expelled by Ellen, Edward's wife, and sent away with some money to support herself. I grew up hearing stories about my father, about the wealth he never shared with us." Emily listened attentively, trying to absorb that story that seemed to come from a novel. "When my mother fell ill 5 years ago, she asked me to seek out my father, not for revenge, but to know my origins. I came back to the region, but instead of introducing myself as his son, I decided to work on neighboring lands, observing from a distance the man who never acknowledged my existence." "And the marriage? Was that part of this plan?" asked Emily. Fearing the answer. Michael held her hands firmly. "No, that was genuine impulse. I couldn't bear to see how your father treated you. I felt a connection with you from the first moment. I saw you working silently in the garden of the Miller farm. When I defended you in the square, I wasn't thinking about Edward or any plan. I was thinking only of you." His eyes, sincere and direct, made Emily believe those words. Still, there was much to process. "What happened in that conversation with Edward on our wedding day?" Michael hesitated, but decided to reveal the whole truth. "He recognized me. I don't know how, perhaps from my resemblance to him when he was young. He said he knew who I was since I returned to the region, but preferred to observe from a distance. That day he called me over to say he was sick, that he didn't have much time, and that he wanted to make peace with the past before departing. Emily stood up, unable to remain seated in the face of those revelations. And now, what does this mean for us? Edward wants to officially recognize me as his son and heir. All the movement at the farm, the lawyers, it's for that. He's preparing his will, asterisk. The news was overwhelming. From the wife of a simple rural worker to the potential lady of the largest property in the region, the change was so drastic that Emily could barely comprehend it. "We need time to think," she said finally. "It's too much to process in a single night." Michael nodded, respecting her space. That night, once again, they slept separately, each immersed in their own thoughts and fears about the future. The next morning, a messenger arrived at the small house bringing a sealed envelope. It was a formal invitation from Edward Matthews for the couple to dine at the main house of the farm that night, the meeting that would forever change the course of their lives. The main house of the Matthews farm was imposing, with its colonial architecture preserved through generations. Emily, wearing her best dress, felt out of place entering that world of luxury and tradition. Michael, at her side, also showed discomfort. Despite being, by right of blood, part of that legacy. Edward received them in the main room, seated in a leather armchair. His appearance was fragile, marked by the illness that was consuming him, but his eyes still maintained the penetrating shine that Emily had noticed in previous encounters. "Welcome to the Matthews house," he said with a tired smile. "Please sit down. We have much to talk about." During dinner, served by silent and efficient employees, Edward told his version of the story, how he had met Teresa, how he had genuinely fallen in love, but had yielded to family and social pressures to maintain his marriage to Ellen, a union arranged between traditional families. "I've made many mistakes in my life," confessed Edward, with a voice heavy with emotion. "The biggest was not acknowledging you, Michael, and not protecting your mother as I should have," Emily observed. The interaction between father and son, noting the physical similarities she hadn't noticed before, the same shape of the eyes, the strong chin, the gestures when speaking. The blood tie that united them was undeniable. "Why now?" asked Michael after listening in silence. "Why acknowledge me after so long?" "Because I'm leaving this world, and I want to leave it in order," replied Edward, without beating around the bush. "I have no other children. Ellen was never able to conceive, and our marriage long ago became just a formality. I want my legacy to continue through you, my son." The words hung in the air, loaded with meaning. Edward then called his lawyer, who was waiting in another room, and in the presence of everyone formalized his decision. Michael would be legally recognized as Michael Matthews, the son and sole heir of Edward Matthews. The farm and all the family businesses would pass to his hands after the patriarch's death. Upon leaving the main house that night, Emily and Michael remained in silence during the entire way back. The magnitude of that change was difficult to assimilate. Suddenly they were no longer a humble couple fighting for daily survival, but the future masters of a rural empire. In the weeks that followed, Edward rapidly worsened. The disease advanced without mercy, and the doctors no longer offered hopes of recovery. Michael visited his father daily, building in a few weeks the relationship that had been denied to them for decades. Emily, in turn, dealt with the looks and comments from the community. The news of Michael's recognition as Edward Matthews' son spread quickly, provoking diverse reactions, from disguised admiration to explicit envy, to suspicion about the couple's true intentions. Anthony Miller, who previously treated his son-in-law with disdain, now displayed a convenient pride in his daughter. The once rare visits became frequent, always accompanied by thinly veiled requests for favors and money. "You owe him nothing," said Michael one night, seeing Emily's discomfort after another visit from her father. "Respect must be earned, not demanded." Those words strengthened Emily, who finally found her voice after years of submission. With gentleness but firmness, she established clear boundaries with her father during his next visit. You will always be welcome in our home, Father, but our relationship needs to be based on mutual respect, not interests. Anthony's expression mixed surprise and indignation, but for the first time he didn't react with authority. The daughter who used to bow down now faced him as an equal asterisk. A rainy August afternoon brought the news everyone was expecting. Edward Matthews had passed away. His body was laid to rest in the chapel of the farm, with the presence of farmers, politicians, and important figures from the region. Michael, as the recently recognized son, received condolences with a dignity that impressed everyone. Emily, at his side, observed the scene with a mix of emotions. She hadn't truly known Edward, but she felt the weight of her husband's pain and the responsibility that now fell on his shoulders. The will was read 3 days after the funeral. As promised, Michael inherited everything: the main farm, smaller properties in neighboring counties, shares in agricultural companies, and a considerable fortune in various investments. From rural worker to one of the richest men in the region, the transformation was dizzying. The move to the main house occurred a week later. Emily walked through the spacious rooms with a mixture of wonder and estrangement. The robust furniture of noble wood, the Persian rugs, the portraits of Matthew's family ancestors on the walls, everything seemed to silently test her, questioning if she would be up to this new role. The canopy bed in the master bedroom, where Edward and Ellen had slept for decades, was more intimidating than enchanting. On the first night, Emily hesitated before it. "We can use another bedroom if you prefer," suggested Michael, noticing her discomfort. "No," she replied with determination. "This is our house now. We need to make it our home, not live as visitors." That night, for the first time since the wedding, they truly shared the intimacy of a couple, not out of obligation or social convention, but by a mutual choice based on trust and growing affection. The first months as owners of the Matthews farm brought unexpected challenges. Old employees resisted the changes proposed by Michael, accustomed to Edward's traditional administration. One in particular, Sebastian, foreman of the farm for more than 30 years, represented the strongest resistance. "Things have always been done this way, boss," he would say, with a superficial respect that barely disguised his discontent. "Changing now could bring problems." Michael, patient but firm, maintained his course. "I respect your experience, Sebastian, but new times demand new practices. We need to improve working conditions, modernize equipment, diversify crops." Emily, in turn, faced resistance in the main house. The older maids, loyal to the memory of Ellen, who after the reading of the will had left to live with relatives in New York, observed each gesture of the new lady with critical eyes and barely disguised whispers. Instead of imposing authority by force, Emily chose the path of example. She reorganized the house in a more functional way, created fairer schedules for the female employees, offered improvements in the employees' accommodations. Gradually, genuine respect began to replace forced obedience. One morning, Emily found Sebastian in the garden, inspecting the work of 2 young helpers. His expression was harsh, his words rough in the face of an error made by the young men. "Good morning, Sebastian," she interrupted, with a serene smile. "I see we're having some challenges here." The foreman straightened his posture, clearly uncomfortable with the intervention. "Just teaching these boys to do the job right, Mrs. Emily." "I understand. And how did you learn your craft? Did you get everything right from the first day?" The question, asked without confrontation, caught Sebastian by surprise. "Well, no. My father was the foreman before me. I learned from him, making mistakes too." "And did he yell at you when you made mistakes?" Sebastian lowered his eyes, thoughtful. "Sometimes, but mainly he showed me how to do it right." "Perhaps that's what these young men need," suggested Emily gently. "Someone who shows the way, not just points out the errors." That simple conversation marked the beginning of a subtle change in the farm's dynamics. Sebastian, still resistant in many aspects, began to observe with different eyes the work of the new owner couple. It wasn't just a question of authority or tradition. It was a new vision of how human relationships could function, based on mutual respect and shared growth. At night, when she shared with Michael the day's events, Emily felt they were, slowly, building something meaningful. Not just managing a property, but transforming lives, including their own. "Do you know what impresses me most about you?" said Michael, embracing her as they observed the starry sky from the porch of the main house. "Your ability to see beyond appearances, to perceive the potential in people." "I learned early to observe, to understand what isn't said," she replied, recalling the years of imposed silence in her father's house. "Sometimes the greatest strengths are born from the deepest wounds." Michael kissed her forehead with tenderness, understanding the depth of those words. The affection between them, which had been born of such unusual circumstances, now blossomed into true love, built day after day, challenge after challenge. As they retired to sleep that night, Emily couldn't imagine that the greatest test was still to come, one that would challenge not only her determination, but the very essence of the love they had built. The Matthews farm was gradually transforming under Michael and Emily's administration. Months passed, and with them new cultivation methods were implemented, work relationships were restructured, and the property began to reflect the couple's vision for a fairer and more prosperous future for everyone. While Michael occupied himself with rural management, modernizing equipment and diversifying crops, Emily developed an equally important work, though less visible to many. She was rebuilding the social fabric of the community. With silent determination, she transformed the main house, once a symbol of distance and privilege, into a community center. The large dining room, which had rarely received more than half a dozen important guests during Edward's time, now housed weekly meetings with workers and their families. "You're changing everything," commented Mrs. Josephine, the old cook of the house, while helping Emily prepare snacks for one of these meetings. "In the late master's time, we would never see children running through these corridors." Emily smiled, observing through the window the group of children playing in the garden, waiting for the beginning of the literacy classes she had organized. "This house is too big for just 2 people, Mrs. Josephine. What sense would there be in keeping so much empty space while there are so many needs in the community?" In 6 months, Emily had established a small educational center, hiring teachers from the city to teach adults to read and to supplement the precarious education that children received in the region's only rural school. She also created a community sewing room where women could produce and sell their work, and a basic medical care post which received a volunteer doctor twice a month. All these initiatives naturally met with resistance, not just from Sebastian and other old employees of the farm, who viewed with suspicion any change in the status quo, but also from neighboring farmers who feared that the Matthews example would contaminate their own workers with dangerous ideas about rights and dignity. "They're circulating a petition against us," Michael told Emily one August night as they analyzed the farm's accounts in his office. "They claim we are disorganizing the local order and inciting rebellions among workers." Emily put her pen down on the table, concerned but not surprised. It was to be expected. Changes are never well received by those who benefit from the previous situation. "They're pressuring suppliers not to do business with us, making it difficult to transport our production," continued Michael, running his hand through his hair in a gesture of concern. "They can cause us significant losses." "And what do you intend to do?" asked Emily, studying her husband's expression. Michael stood up and walked to the window, observing the property he now managed. "Continue. What we're doing is right, Emily. Not just from a moral standpoint, but also practical. Healthier workers who are better fed and educated produce more and better. Our results already begin to prove this." Emily stood up and joined him at the window, intertwining her fingers with his in a gesture of silent support. This man, who had entered her life in such an unexpected way, revealed himself each day more as a partner with whom she shared not just a roof, but values and a vision of the world. External resistance, however, intensified in the following weeks. The movement led by traditional farmers gained strength, and malicious rumors about the couple began to circulate. They said that Emily practiced witchcraft to control her husband, that Michael's recognition as Edward's son was a fraud, that the couple planned to distribute land among the workers, threatening the region's land structure. However, something unexpected began to happen. Workers from other farms, inspired by the dignified treatment they received at the Matthews property, began to demand similar conditions from their bosses. Small producers, seeing the positive results of the new agricultural techniques implemented by Michael, began to visit him seeking guidance. Gradually, the movement against them began to lose strength, undermined not by direct confrontation, but by the concrete example that a new form of rural administration was not just possible but advantageous for all involved. Amidst these external challenges, Emily also faced an internal battle. Despite the apparent security of her new position, she still carried the emotional scars from years of oppression in her father's house. On stormy nights, Michael sometimes found her on the porch, her gaze lost in the darkness, as if looking for something she had left behind. "What are you thinking about?" he asked on one of these nights, sitting beside her. "About how life takes turns," she replied, after a moment of silence. "A year ago, I was practically a servant in my father's house, without a voice, without choices. Now I have everything I could desire materially, but, Michael encouraged when she hesitated, "but I still carry that frightened girl inside me. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, fearing that all of this is just a dream, that I'll open my eyes and be back in that life." Michael took her hands in his, a gesture that had become familiar and comforting for both. "It's not a dream, Emily. We built this together, and no one can take from us what we've conquered with honest work and firm principles." It was in this moment of shared vulnerability that Emily finally revealed to Michael news she had been keeping for a few weeks. "We're expecting a child, Michael." His expression transformed from surprise to pure joy. In an impulsive movement, he embraced her tightly, then backed away, concerned he might hurt her. "A child," he repeated, as if he needed to hear the words again to believe. "Our child." Emily's pregnancy brought a new dimension to the couple's life. Michael became even more protective, while she, contrary to traditional expectations, remained active in her community projects. The news spread quickly, provoking a wave of genuine joy among the farm workers, who had already developed deep respect and affection for their new mistress. It was during this period of happiness that the past knocked on their door again. On a rainy November afternoon, Emily received an unexpected visit. Her father, Anthony Miller. Unlike previous visits, when he came demanding favors and displaying a convenient pride in his now rich daughter, Anthony appeared dejected, aged, with a humility that Emily had never seen in him. "May I come in, daughter?" he asked, remaining at the door, respecting the space he previously invaded without ceremony. Emily led him to the living room, noticing how he observed every detail of the main house, with a mixture of admiration and discomfort. She offered him coffee, which he accepted with a murmured thank you. "You're different," commented Anthony after a long silence. "Stronger, more confident." "Life has changed me, Father," Emily replied simply. "Not just life. You transformed yourself through your own merit," he acknowledged, surprising her. "I always underestimated your strength." The words, spoken with difficulty by a man who rarely admitted mistakes, touched Emily more deeply than she expected. "Why did you come today, Father?" Anthony lowered his eyes to the coffee cup between his hands, calloused from a lifetime of work. "I'm sick, Emily. I don't know how much time I have left." The news hit her like a physical blow. Despite everything she had suffered at this man's hands, he was still her father, the only blood family she had left. "The doctor spoke of months, maybe a year," he continued with a weak voice. I didn't come to ask for anything material. I came because I don't want to depart carrying the weight of not having asked for forgiveness. Asterisk through contained tears, Anthony confessed regrets from a lifetime. The harshness with which he had treated his daughter, the misguided pride, the fear of losing her that manifested in excessive control. He spoke of the loneliness that had consumed him since she left, aggravated by the late awareness of his mistakes. Asterisk. Emily listened in silence without interrupting him. When he finally finished, she remained thoughtful for long moments before responding. I can't erase the past, Father. The marks I carry are deep and permanent, but I can choose how to deal with them from now on. I understand if you can't forgive. For me, he said, resigned. It's not about forgiveness or not, Emily explained. It's about not allowing resentment to paralyze me. You will have all the medical assistance you need, and you will always be welcome in our house, not because of merit, but because I choose not to carry the weight of hatred. Asterisk. That meeting marked the beginning of a reconstructed relationship, not based on bonds of submission or dependence, but on the mutual respect that Emily had finally earned. Anthony began to visit the Matthews farm no longer as a demanding intruder, but as a respectful visitor who slowly tried to get to know the strong woman his daughter had become. Spring arrived, bringing with it the birth of Emily and Michael's son, a healthy boy whom they named Matthew, a symbol of a new beginning. The baptism, held in the farm's chapel, gathered workers, neighbors, and even some of the farmers who had previously opposed the couple, now curious about the growing prosperity of the Matthews property. Among the guests was Anthony, visibly moved as he held his grandson in his arms. His health had temporarily stabilized, thanks to the treatment that Michael had insisted on financing at the best hospitals in the capital. He has your eyes, commented the old farmer, observing the baby. Alert, observant. He'll be someone who sees beyond appearances like his mother. Emily smiled, recognizing in those words not just a compliment, but a late understanding of qualities he had never properly valued. In the months that followed, the Matthews farm established itself as a model of innovative management in the region. The improvised school became a formal institution, with its own building and permanent teachers. The medical post expanded to a small clinic that served the entire rural community. Production cooperatives formed by women and young people from the region began to generate additional income for families, traditionally dependent only on male work in the field. Michael Kommer, now recognized as a visionary leader, was frequently consulted by regional authorities on agricultural and social issues. Emily, in turn, had become a reference in rural education and community development, sharing her experiences in meetings and seminars in the state capital. The main house, once a symbol of social segregation, had transformed into a truly community space. The old rooms that had housed untouched porcelain now housed literacy classes. The hall where Edward Matthews received politicians and farmers for exclusive dinners was now the stage for meetings where workers discussed on equal terms with owners about fair prices and dignified working conditions. On an autumn afternoon, 5 years after their unlikely marriage, Emily and Michael found themselves on the porch of the main house, watching little Matthew play in the garden with other children from the farm. In the distance, the sun was beginning to set, tinting the fields with gold that stretched to the horizon. Sometimes I still wonder how we got here, commented Emily, resting her head on her husband's shoulder. From an arranged marriage in the square to all this, Michael smiled, wrapping his arm around her. It wasn't just destiny or luck. It was your strength, Emily. Your ability to transform each obstacle into an opportunity, each wound into learning. She reflected on those words, recognizing their truth. The silenced girl she once was had found her voice, not just for herself, but for an entire community that now flourished under their shared leadership. We've built something bigger than ourselves, she said, watching their son, who was growing in a world so different from the one she had known in her childhood. A legacy that isn't measured in land or money, but in transformed lives. Michael nodded, deeply understanding the meaning of those words. A legacy of love, he completed, with simplicity. In that moment, contemplating the sun setting over the lands they administered with wisdom and compassion, Emily and Michael understood that they had achieved a form of wealth that neither the young rural worker nor the oppressed farmer's daughter had ever imagined possible. The wealth of a life built on foundations of mutual respect, shared purpose, and a love that had grown naturally, day after day. Challenge after challenge. Their union, which had begun as a scandal in the square of the small town, had transformed into the moral turning point for an entire community. Together they had proven that it was possible to rise without crushing, to lead without humiliating, to transform without destroying. True greatness, after all, was not in titles or possessions, but in the ability to use power to elevate those around them. As the first stars appeared in the sky, Emily and Michael called their son and walked together back to the house they had transformed not just into a home, but into a radiating center of change that spread like ripples in